I think I'm a special one.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
What's up? Happy New Year. I guess you could say the new year is on the half turn.
That doesn't even make sense. Like, it makes sense if it was like 2025 on the half turn.
Why?
Because like half turn and the year 2022, the year of the half turn, let's say. The year of the half turn.
I thought it was clever.
No, it wasn't. What is this? Episode 31?
Guess so.
All right. So it's January, what is it, 2nd? January 2nd. First episode in the new year. We did an episode last month about, we did the USMNT draft, kind of recap some stuff going on in the soccer world. So what's going on?
Nothing. Just real quick to that draft. I don't know how you got more votes than I did.
Yeah, my team was much better.
I don't think so. I had of the current national team starting lineup, I have 6 out of the 5 starters.
Well, that's what happens when you have the number 1 pick, and I took Pulisic with the number 1 pick, and he's much better than anybody else that we could put in that position. So it makes sense. And then you got 2 players. Then I got 1. So it makes sense that,
I guess from the naked eye, it looked
the people voted, and the people have spoken, and they knew my team was better.
All right.
And anybody that had a clear opinion on it was like, wow, Andrew's team's much better. The only people that voted for you were like, I guess Chad's team's a little better. So like, I have all the hardcore fans on my side. But yeah, so what are you wearing today? And then we'll talk about this.
So I got a brand new Bayern Leverkusen jersey. It's pretty nice. White Jacko is the brand. On my head, I got Live Breathe Football.
Is that Live? Let me see.
Oh no, it's not Live Breathe.
It's not Live Breathe.
What is this? Support local.
I think it's a brand called Talesman Cap. They make
that's right. They make a lot of hats.
Just like random like soccer apparel.
Yeah, they make some pretty cool hats. I got them mixed up with Live Breathe Football because they make similar stuff, but both of them are pretty cool. How about you? What do you got on?
So I'm wearing my PSV jersey. I'm pretty sure I've worn this on here before. I got it at the store downtown. It's, probably pretty old. I don't know. I don't think PSV really changed their kits much. It's always the red and white stripes, but I just think it's cool. And like, I always kind of respected like the Ajax, the PSV, those kind of clubs for developing their own players.
The Dutch style,
total football. So I thought it was cool. I actually have a few jerseys that like I haven't worn on here yet that I'm going to wear, but I'll wait and see. I will spoil it. I do have a Mexico jersey that I don't think I've worn on the podcast yet, but I got to be selective when I wear it because like, especially if we're talking about men's national team, I can't be wearing a Mexico jersey talking about the national team.
Yeah.
But that leads us to the topic of this episode. So today we're going to talk about free play. So like free play is pickup soccer. It's unstructured. It's something like I care about a lot as I started to coach and like learn more about like just different soccer, like philosophies, upbringings, like what makes a player. And I think like part of this podcast is we've gotten into the flow of like reacting to things. And I think it'd be cool to just do an episode that doesn't get old, right? Like you could listen to this in 2 years and this stuff would still be the same. Like you're still learning and like, maybe people like to hear it. Maybe people don't. I don't know. I
hope in 2 years people are listening to this.
Oh, dude, you remember that free play episode that like on the half turn took off, man?
I mean, I remember that Rondo episode.
The Rondo. People like the Rondo. So I think our most popular episode was the one with Alexi Lawless, which was a great interview. He was awesome. But like, I didn't realize that many people like really cared about Alexi Lawless. I think they were just like, wow, these dudes got Alexi Lawless on the podcast. Then I think the Rondo episode was second. Then I think episode number 1 was third. So let's get those numbers back up.
Nice.
Yeah. So I kind of went at this as a coach. I always think about younger players developing. So there's free play, pickup soccer, whatever for older players, right? But like that's not an intriguing topic. It's cool. It's soccer culture, whatever. But this is about younger players, developing them, soccer culture, that kind of stuff. And what kind of sparked is like, it definitely part of the way I coach. I think it's super important to incorporate as much of this as you can in youth sports, but I'm always reading and researching and listening to podcasts and stuff. And a lot of my notes that I have are from the book I mentioned on last episode. It's called How Elite Athletes Are Made. And it's not groundbreaking stuff, but they just kind of dive into different topics and give you studies. So I have a lot of notes about different parts of the world, how they approach free play and the soccer culture. So I don't know. What do you think? Like, define free play for us. Like, what you thought of it when I
would say free play is just unstructured. I wouldn't say, I guess unstructured training. I would consider it like small-sided games or any type of games, like limited amount of rules.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think you mentioned, like,
do you have a definition?
I didn't define it, no, because I figured like we would just get on here and talk about it and let the episode define it. And I told you before we started recording that I think the title of the episode will be a quote from Albert Einstein that says, "Play is the highest form of research." And like, I kind of go about that every time I coach U.S. soccer. They are trying to implement this like practice play style to coach younger players. So you get there and you play fairly unstructured. You just kind of set up a field, a few rules, then you practice a certain phase of the game. So whether it's building out of the back or scoring goals in the opponent's half, something like that, and then play again, but just a bigger game. And like, so I follow it pretty well. Like, it works, but I just think the research aspect, like when you're playing, you're constantly getting feedback. If I'm a player in a 2v2 game and I lose the ball, it's pretty easy to see why I lost the ball, because the game is so small. If I'm playing in an 11v11 game, I'm not getting the ball as much, right? Because the field's bigger, there's more players. The feedback is so much slower. Think about like for me, right? If I were to go play in an 11v11 game right now, I might have a good game or bad game, but it's hard for me to tell like what I'm good at or what I can improve because there's so few chances to do that. But if I'm a younger player, I might not even know that I'm learning or doing something, but like a younger player would soak up all this information that they don't even know. If they know that every time they get on their left foot, they're getting the ball stolen, they might try to do a different move to shake the defender or put it on their right foot and cut inside. So I think that's where the highest form of research comes from. And players will find ways to challenge themselves, as I defined this phrase implicit learning. So like, I'm not a teacher or anything, but I find myself reading teaching and education articles just to see how it could apply to soccer. So with Google, I kind of defined it: implicit learning, acquiring knowledge about the subject without conscious awareness. So I kind of went on, allow players to learn and gain feedback from the game rather than coach. So like, if we're talking about a player playing in, let's say, a pickup game, they're playing 4v4 with their friends. They're thinking, or they're reflecting on how they did well, or if they lost the ball, or if they made a shot, or why not, just based on the feedback of the game. Because if they made a shot and it went in, the player's probably thinking, wow, that was a good shot. Let me do that again. How can I get that shot off again? Does that make sense? Like, are you following what I'm saying?
Meaning like limited coaching from outside people.
And ideally what we're talking about when free play or pickup soccer, maybe we could find another term as this podcast goes on. It's like just themselves, no coach, maybe not even like parent supervision, just the players on a field playing in whatever setting. And I also talked about, these are just my notes that I wrote down. Structured coaching can inhibit creativity and the overall ceiling as a player. And like, if you have a player that's really good at, let's say, street soccer, pickup soccer, it's much easier to fit them into a system as they get older, because they've probably developed a certain set of skills, whether they're perfect for a system or not, rather than have a player that you just teach the system to and you drill it into them, and then they can't play any other system and they're less skilled than other players.
Yeah.
And that's why I think you see a lot of, like we'll talk about later, players from the streets of Brazil. They're creative, they have flair, because they grew up playing all the time, and then you fit them into that system.
Which is probably easier to do.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is like, you'd rather have that base of skill and then worry about the system later or the tactics later. And one of the other things I was thinking about when I was writing this stuff down is like, players shouldn't be reliant on a coach or a parent to tell them what to do. Like, it drives me nuts when a parent talks, says too much on the sideline, or a coach says too much on the sideline, or like the kid might only go out and play with their parent, and they're just like, they're relying on that feedback from the adult. And if that adult's feedback is not perfect or the best possible feedback, they're not getting the right, like the game will get that feedback out of, to them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we're just constantly playing in a smaller setting than an 11v11 game, there's feedback to be gained. So a player can like work to, solve their own problems, right? Like if you're in a 3v3 game and we're not able to beat the other team, we could might take us a couple games, or maybe until we're better, or maybe 3 years later, but like we'll be able to solve our own problems or figure out why we're not beating that specific team.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then like also write down decision making versus technical skill. You see a lot of coaches talk about like technical skill, and you'll see these players doing like these little skills in like a little box or something, teaching like a pullback or a step over or something. And it's like, for me, I'd rather a player just play the game. And if they could do one step over in a small sided game, it's worth so much more than 100 step overs unopposed with nobody there, and then they can't do it in the game. I've coached kids that, they know the scissors move because they learned it out of camp. But before that, I didn't see them do scissors once in a game. So they clearly know it. They had the technical ability, but they've never done it before. But if they just grow up learning the game and they could learn that move, they pull it off once and it works, then what is the game teaching them?
They probably have to learn the move first, though.
Maybe, but if they could learn it in the game, in the flow of the game, somehow, maybe with some guidance or whatever, then the game's feedback to them is telling them this move works. This move beat the defender, right? So that's kind of like where the decision making versus just the technical ability to get it done. So that was kind of like the opening rant. Hopefully that kind of like set the stage. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Back to what you were saying just there. I think players also have to see what they want to do. So they have to see someone do that move beforehand, right?
Yeah, that's a good, like, think about it. If we went to a park and there was a pickup game going on and we hopped in, right? You see it all the time with basketball. You see somebody do the move or you see, you see them do it, you learn how to do it, or you try it. And then that's more feedback that you get. So I think like the free play pickup culture creates just people trying new things over and over again.
And there's no repercussions of doing something bad unless it hurts your team and they get mad at you, but that's about it.
People talk a lot about like in Brazil, like you'd get kicked off the court if you lost, right? And then you have to wait again. But like that's not a big deal. Like I think people here are afraid to make mistakes, especially in youth soccer. But like if you're just playing free play, pickup soccer, whatever, you make a mistake, like it's okay. There's a million more plays next. But if you're playing a full-sided game, kid might get taken out, or they might get yelled at, or they might not get the ball for another 2 minutes. But in a smaller sided game where the stakes are lower, they're more likely to try these things. Mm-hmm. And then when the stakes are higher, they're more likely to pull them off.
Right.
So quick story, like one of my favorite podcasts I listen to is called Coaching Inside the Box. I forget how I found it, Twitter maybe. And it's these like 3 or 4 guys, and they run a club in Kansas City. But like all of where they practice is just a bunch of really small indoor fields with walls and stuff. That's why they're inside the box, coaching inside the box. There's a guy on there who's from England, and he told a story about these guys from Ashington, England, which is just a town. But from, like the 50s to like early 70s, they developed 4 of the best players in the world and like tons of other pros. I'm not English, so I don't know all of these guys. Jackie Milburn, Sir Bobby Charlton, Jack Charlton, Jimmy Adamson. So you probably heard of Sir Bobby Charlton.
Yeah.
I think he played for United. I don't know
Yeah.
anything about him.
Yeah.
But so the story he said was that they would all play on the street. It was all like all these houses were next to each other, streets, the street had lights, and they would just play on the street like all day. And it developed all of these like creative players. And then eventually the town became more suburban. People got cars. They would park the cars on the road. It became harder to play in the streets. And now there's like no pros coming out of Ashington, England.
Wow.
So it went from a hotbed of soccer to nothing because there was just these crazy pickup games in Ashington.
And now there's less space to play.
Yeah. So because of the cars in the streets and just less kids out on the street, it's no longer a hotbed for soccer.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I have a couple like quotes and statistics from this book that I'm reading. So some of these are quoted from the book. It's How Elite Athletes Are Made. I forget the author, but maybe I'll put it in the description or something. So they first talked in this chapter, they talked about the streets of Paris. So everyone knows like France is pretty much they've been an up and coming powerhouse for a while. Now they have like this newer crop of players that's just unreal. So they said in the outskirts of Paris, they play between tower blocks and concrete cages. Now that might be the case some places, other places they might just play on basketball courts. Quote from Riyad Mahrez: "I think that's why the best technical players come from the streets." He's talking about how his parents let them go out and play all day. And he said that the technical ability comes from the streets. So the ability to dribble, pass, shoot. He learned that on his own through playing in the streets. Like in my mind, I'm thinking, did Riyad Mahrez like go, did he stand in lines and pass to somebody else back and forth till he mastered the technique? That's what makes me mad about like when people say you got to master the basics first. Like maybe like to some extent, but like you got to play the game.
Right. Maybe eventually he would have mastered the technique, passing back and forth, but not doing that for an hour and a half, 2 times a week. Yeah, exactly. And the fact that he was able to probably in these street games, in these cages, it's probably 3v3, 4v4. He's just constantly getting feedback. If that technique isn't there, he's losing the ball and he knows, well, that didn't work. Let me try something else. Or maybe I have to do that faster and then it will work. But I don't know if he's thinking that, but he's probably just subconsciously learning that. So here's a statistic. Analysis of France, Belgium, England. So 3 of the 4 World Cup semifinalists in 2018. They all came from migrant backgrounds. Migrant backgrounds were substantially overrepresented in all squads. So you see in France, there's a lot of immigrants from like the Northern African countries. England, same thing, right? A lot of Nigerian roots in like London. Yeah. Who else? Belgium. I guess Belgium has a lot of immigrants, but those, they said in the book, are more likely to just let their kids play on the streets, right? More likely to live in a populated area, more likely to have more kids to play. Yeah. Bigger families, that kind of thing. I think that has to do with immigrants coming over and moving to bigger cities. Yeah. With more people around. Yep. So this study of these street games in France concluded that a 4v4 or 5v5 game, players will touch the ball about every 4 to 6 seconds. That seemed a little generous. Like every 4 to 6. Yeah, that seems like ridiculously fast paced. But like it proves the point. 11v11, players will go minutes without touching the ball. That's definitely true. Yeah. So even if you took that 4 to 6 seconds and said you'll touch it every 10 seconds, as opposed to every minute and a half, that's still so many more touches, so many more actions that you're able to look up and just do something with the ball. Yeah. And get actions on the ball. Which is, this kind of off topic, is why people love the 11v11 game so much more than the small-sided game. Yeah. If so many people grow up playing the small-sided game, why do people like the 11v11 game so much more? Yeah. Do you mean like as fans? Yeah. Yeah, I always kind of wondered that too. Like, and why the 11v11 is like the very top and not like a smaller. Yeah, like if futsal or indoor soccer like became like the most popular. But those are growing. Yeah, I think they are growing. Like people are investing in futsal leagues, the indoor leagues are around and stuff.
I think probably just because that's what everyone knows. That's like where all the biggest stars are, all the money. But like, I think you're always going to find success when you like bringing the game down a little bit. Like people talk about how there should be there's 3v3 basketball in the Olympics. I think they messed around putting 3v3 basketball NBA All-Star Weekend. Like people want to see that. It's just not it's not in the culture to want to watch that at the highest level. But like this brought up an example, like when I played for, my team when Comanzi Blitz when I was like 10, 11 years old. Like I just always think back to like, what would I have done different if I was in a different environment? Not that it was a bad environment, but I'm just thinking, we played 11v11 when we were 11 years old, right? So I'm 11 years old on this big field playing right back. Ball comes to me. I kick it. It's a big kick. We all move up the field. Someone else kicks it. We all move back on the field. And like, that was the highlight of our week. We prepared for that game, whether we won or lost, whatever. But like, there was no free play. Like every time I kicked the ball, there was feedback from a coach. There was feedback from my teammates. There was feedback from somebody else. There was never a time where we were in a smaller setting getting much more feedback all the time. I was getting feedback every 3 minutes when the ball came to me, or every time someone passed me the ball, which wasn't a whole lot. But in these smaller games, if me, you, and a few of our boys, from the neighborhood were able to organize a 2v2 or 3v3 game, think about how much more feedback we could get. And if I'm 3 years older than you, and if you brought a friend that was 2 years younger than you, that's a 5-year difference. I might be able to dominate that game. And you might have to learn how to play against a player like me who's bigger. And it also, big guy. Well, and it also, you might have to learn how to body me off the ball or get stronger, or just be that much quicker with the ball. And I might have to learn, to be able to dominate the game as the bigger player. But then if we're also throwing in someone that's 2 years older than me, then that's a different challenge as well. And I think good point. The structured feedback of like a youth soccer game there's not enough like free decisions is, what I'm trying to say. Have you felt the same about your like upbringing in soccer?
Yeah. I just like the point that you said, like if you're playing against when you play against people your age, mm-hmm. you might not experience a bigger player. So you got to learn to how to play around them, or a fast player. You got to learn how to defend like a fast player. Yeah. And those are things that like we don't get taught enough. And like, yeah, sure. Did I go against a really big guy or a really fast guy when I was 11 years old? Yeah. But were there enough reps for me to make a difference? No way. Yeah. Like part of one of the examples I always go back to, I had pretty good technique growing up, but I always say I didn't play enough. There's like something like I could dribble a ball. You give me a ball, I could dribble through cones. I can go do whatever. But there's something in my head that like, I'm not a good dribbler in games or whenever I play against other people. I just like, it's like a mental block kind of thing. And I feel like if I played more unstructured, I would just subconsciously be able to like realize that, oh, there's space there I could dribble. Oh, there's a defender in front of me. No problem. I'll just shake him and go by him. But because there's no lower stakes soccer that we were playing, it was all either practice or games, then I never developed that like smoothness to recognize those patterns. And just think about, I'm talking about 2 practices a week and a game, youth soccer when I was little. Now just imagine if you're 4 hours a day, or not 4 hours a day, 4 hours a week, 5 hours a week, 6 hours a week on the streets or at your local park, playing in lower stakes, like just for fun, kick about. You just try all of these moves and figure out all of the things that work, all the things that don't work on your own with the feedback from the people you're playing with. Right. So like, it could always be better. And then just playing more, I think we'll get that out. He went on in this book to talk about Brazilian culture as well. So here's a quote: during formative years, Brazilians can spend about the same amount of time playing soccer, but they have more informal play. So this study found that Brazilians, like the ones that grow up to be professionals, will spend about the same amount of time playing soccer as somebody in another country or another culture, but a higher percentage of that time was informal
on the streets, in the neighborhood, whatever. At age 12, they typically spend 4 to 5 hours per week on informal play, which is similar to the informal play of leading European-based players of that age. But Brazilians often also played organized futsal in addition to informal play. So they basically doubled the just amount of play, whether organized in their futsal or the informal play, as in like playing with friends on the streets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I watched the video with Jurgen Klinsmann. Did you see that one? He talks about free play.
No, but I saw a quote about it one time.
Yeah, he said that people like there's probably Brazilian kids that are playing 5 hours a day.
Yeah.
Now they're going to be ahead of the curve of people who train with their team, just only train with their team. So I think people who obviously play more on the outside of team training, obviously, you said that they roughly play the same, but I would say they don't play the same amount.
Yeah, I think, maybe I got the studies confused. They're trying to say that they're playing a similar amount of informal play, slightly more, but also like on top of the formal play, if that makes sense. So maybe if we're relating this back to our soccer upbringing, we play for a team, practice twice a week, game on the weekends. But every day we don't have practice. We're coming home from school and playing each other one-on-one for an hour, or getting a couple guys that we're friends with to go play 2v2, or get another group of guys we're playing 5v5 out at the park. So like, that's something that I don't think we have here. And we're going to talk about that later. But I think these studies are all trying to make the same point, that more play is better. Like the more you play, the better. The more you play without a structure, the more creativity and flow to your game. So then he went to the Germans, right? So he talked about, there's a book called Das Reboot. And I read it a couple of years ago, and I didn't quite get the book. So I think I might go back and reread it. But basically, Germany didn't do well in the 98 World Cup, didn't do well in the 2000s. So they set out to like redo a lot of their youth structure in the city. They built a ton of like mini soccer fields all around Germany. And they funded all of these studies to like support it and, see what it was about. So there's a study of the Bundesliga players. So all of the German players in the Bundesliga versus the 2014 winning team, like the players on that team. And they found that the winning players, so like Schweinsteiger, Mario Götze or whatever, played way less formal football, more unstructured football. So you could have a guy playing, doesn't play on the national team for Leverkusen, right? But then you have Thomas Muller on Bayern Munich, also plays for the German national team. He played about the same amount of football, as the random guy on Leverkusen, but he just played more informal on the streets with his friends, trying new things. And this was a study, I think, funded by
That's a crazy.
Yeah. Now I wish I had the exact numbers. I could probably go back to
that's some
book.
Crazy research.
Yeah. And like and they found the same with the women's national team as well. The German women's national team. So like, it shows that it's not like Thomas Muller and the random guy from Leverkusen. It's not that Thomas Muller was born with these crazy genetics or was just in this great academy since he was little.
And he grinded and did like step overs and stuff.
Yeah. It's the fact that
practice his shot.
Yeah. Which he might've done. And maybe that's what set him above and beyond. But he has this base of creativity, a flow of just what we think of like natural talent, is probably because he played more. Like he just played more soccer, more unstructured, what we call informal soccer. So and then here's another one. This talks about Premier League academies. Study of Premier League academies, they found no difference between those released at age 16 from the academies and those not released. Oh wait, what is it? So there's no difference between at 16 years old, those released and those not released. The ones released had more coach-led practice. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if me and you were both 16 in England and we both got released by Crystal Palace. No, you got released by Crystal Palace.
Dang.
I stayed. They found that the players that stayed played more informal, free play soccer, and you had more coach-led practice. Now, to me, this is so obvious that a player with coach-led, is structured. They do well when someone gives them instructions, but that's not soccer. Like soccer, the higher you go, the more instruction you're going to get, but you have to be able to improvise, to think on your own, to solve your own problems. And I think back to the U.S. national team all the time. We titled, so after the U.S. didn't qualify for the Olympics 2021 in March, we titled the episode Boring Soccer. And I remember I clipped up a few clips, put them on Instagram, TikTok, and, they got some traction because we were saying this team was boring. They didn't have anything. We played with 3 defensive midfielders. Forwards didn't create anything. But to me, the problem was there's not a player on the field that's a match winner. They could take the ball. They could dribble through a couple guys. They could take the ball, take a touch and whip in a good cross. Like there was none of that instinctual, like, I'm just going to go. I'm just going to win the match. I'm going to nutmeg this guy. I'm going to play with some flair. I'm going to dribble past the on-rushing defender, the high-pressing defender. So when a team sits on a low block, you have nobody to break the game open. So I see that stat, and I see like we talked about earlier, the ceiling for the players that play in these unstructured environments with creativity is much higher, and you'll just do the work later in their life to fit them into the system rather than coaching them into the system at too early of an age.
Then you have to ask yourself, when's a good time to bring a player who's playing in an unstructured setting and bring them into like a team setting.
That's actually a good point here. I have that covered.
All
so the writer of this book, he talked about Clairefontaine, which is the academy in France. It's on like the outside of Paris. So that's where the France national team practices, and it's where the France youth national team practices. One of the things they talked about was that when they bring the players in, the youth players, when they start out, they're mostly players on the street or for their local clubs, but they play a lot on the street. The players at Clairefontaine don't practice for more than an hour a day. So that lets them go back home and play for their club team, or go back home and play on the streets or whatever, so that they're not just learning the Clairefontaine France national team structure. They're learning street soccer, this, that, and all of it. So they don't want to overwhelm them with information, because they're not trying to fit them into a system. They're just trying to develop the best possible player. And the best possible player might have creative flair. They might be able to strike a ball. They might be able to dribble or pass. And on the street or informal or pickup,
and then eventually you'll hit on a player.
Yeah.
A few players.
Yeah. You broaden the pool. So if you just put everyone into a structure, there might be 5 out of 10 really good in that structure. But if you develop 8 out of 10 to be really, really good players, then you fit those 8 into a structure that works for them.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why the best national teams don't always grow up in a certain formation. Like Belgium kind of plays like a 3 in the back style, right? But they just do that because they have all of these good players that can do their own thing. They've developed something special about them. Now they can mix it up. France played a little bit with 3 in the back. They played a 4-3-3, played a 4-4-2 diamond. So the formation and the structure doesn't really matter because you can adapt it. But what really matters to me is, like, if U.S. soccer came in and was like, everyone at the youth level, mandate more pickup games, but everyone at the youth level, we need more free play. We need dribblers. Only focus on dribbling. Let them be creative. Let them go do this and do that. Then by the time all of these players are older, you might have an increase, 15% increase in more effective dribblers. It's not going to be everybody, but you just playing the odds.
Yeah. I want to go back to the EPL academy point. I don't know if this correlates, but I feel like there's so many stories where it's like, this dude was at an academy since he was 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe those types of players are the ones being released at 16.
Yeah, maybe. I will say I want to do more research into it. Apparently, like in England, there's grassroots, which is like rec soccer, kind of. Maybe a little bit like rec, a little bit like travel. And then there's academy soccer. So if you're on a higher level club team at like 9 or 10 years old, that's the equivalent of like being in an academy there, because there's so many academies. But I would guess that the older you get, the more you ramp up in the academy. So like, let's say you play for the Crystal Palace Academy. At 8, you might only go once a week or twice a week or whatever. At 12, you might go all the time, 5 days a week. That might be different, but yeah, that's a good point, because like maybe those players that are in that environment too early and only are in that environment are the ones being released. But here's another pretty good stat. Average of academy players. So the average of academy players that are offered first team contracts played 9 hours of informal play per week. Those not offered first team contracts only played about 4 to 5 hours per week. So informal play, check. More informal play, check again. First, you're like guaranteed first team contract. Like, it's hard to think of a player that would play a lot of quality pickup soccer that just wouldn't be good. Normally, I'm sure a kid would be drawn to something he's good at, but the more you do something, the better you'll get.
I don't think that means that every player that signs a academy player that signs a pro contract, that each one 9 hours per week.
No.
I think
there's probably some that play 15 hours. And
I think where it says not offered a contract 4 to 5 hours, there's probably a lot of dudes that are pulling that average down who like just
they just don't. Yeah, they're just like roll off the training. Yeah, I guess I'll play in this academy. Like I don't really feel like it, but I think it goes to show like these stats might not be totally accurate, but play on your own, play informal, unstructured, free flowing, pickup, whatever you can get. Play more of it than you should, and like you'll improve. You'll be better. And I think, it's fun, right? Like if you have a little bit of success and the environment's nice, you find then people just have fun. You see like the typical like kind of streets of New York City, like pickup basketball, right? If you just have fun and you play, then you're not going to be worrying about it. And then it goes back to that implicit learning. You don't know that you're learning. You don't know that you're picking up on those patterns, but you are. If I know I'm on the left and I'm trying to cut in on my right foot and shoot, and the guy blocks it, I know I got to be a little bit quicker or maybe hit him with a little bit more hesitation. But like, I might not be always reflecting on it. The game's just giving me that feedback. And then the book also goes in on the same lines. There's a study about the NBA. The NBA funded a study on youth development and like player development. And if you notice in the NBA, who's taking over the league? Foreign players, right? European players who probably just play. What's on the decline? These like free flowing kind of creative basketball players. Because what are they all doing now? They're all just playing AAU basketball all of the time. It's just basketball. It's set in plays. And that's why you get these guys who come into the league and like the talent's higher, but relative to everyone else, it's not higher. And that's why these guys like burn out or they flop by the time they're 16 or 17. Because they're just put in these like hyper competitive structured environments rather than unstructured environments.
I've just always said that European players that come into the NBA, they're always like so good at like the technical parts of the game.
And they're crafty too. Like you think Jokic would be the passer Jokic would be if he was playing for the Compton Magic AAU basketball team? Probably not, dude. They'd have him doing the mic and drill all day and like setting picks and whatever, but it's like, nah, Jokic is Jokic, and that's why he's special. Or Luka's Luka, that's why he's special. And it's a similar thing, like the similar player development. Mm-hmm. And then the NBA also concluded unorganized informal play introduces players to more variables such as roles, positions, court size, surface, number of players in the games, like 1v1, 3v3. And skill level of players too. Like we talked about, like you might play against a really good player and play against a really bad player. So yeah, that's kind of like a recap of what they talked about in the book and what kind of sparked this like conversation, being like, hey, let's talk about free play.
I think everybody that plays soccer would love to just play, like at the end of practice when coach is like, all right, we're going to do 7v7.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, that's the reason why most people even show up to practice.
Yeah.
So I think it's more on the people teaching the kids or
the culture
or creating a setting for
here's something that I always like. I feel like I went wrong. I feel like when I was little, I don't think many other players are like this. I didn't like playing as much, but that was because I was so good at the other things, the isolated skills. And even as I went into college, right, I would train on my own. I would practice. Like I worked really hard and I developed some really good skills and I got a lot better. but it didn't always translate because I wasn't playing, even at an older age, I wasn't playing enough indoor, pick up with my friends, just different games. I was trying to isolate a specific skill. I was trying to isolate, if I played left back, I'd envision myself playing left back, receiving the ball with my left foot and playing a pass forward. That's great. Like, I want to improve on that skill. I don't need to master that specific skill in that specific like training environment. Like I was telling you the one day, like I went out to the field and just like whipped in 40 like left-footed curling crosses. Like that's nice. That's a skill you can improve. But like to think like I'm going to reach the next level by mastering this one skill is so unrealistic. Now, if you took 25% of that and then added the other 75% of effort into playing more games or just overall like improving your general skill, then I feel like that's a lot more effective. And the isolating a certain skill isn't how you improve in a game like soccer.
You could look at Trent, for example.
Yeah, but his
style of play, I mean, he's probably amazing in 5v5.
Yeah, but just because he could whip in a cross from anywhere, it doesn't mean that he only focuses on whipping in crosses from somewhere.
Yeah, but he eventually learned that skill.
Yeah.
Not from small-sided games.
Yeah, but he's, that's a senior player in the Liverpool team where you could focus in on individual things. Yeah, I didn't like find as much joy in playing small-sided games when I was little and even when like into college and whatever. But now like I find, I love going to like indoor men's league games and whatever, just because like I just get to play like, and even now I have a hard time finding something new to try out because that's just who I am. I'm more structured. I'm more like isolated technique, and it's held me back for so long, dude. Like it's the total opposite of how I coach little kids now. And I feel like I'm doing a good job coaching these younger kids, but yeah. So do you have anything to add, or we like one more kind of subtopic off of this?
I just wrote down the four major things that free play creates.
Yeah, go for it.
I said creativity, obviously.
Yep.
What we said.
So with that creativity, I think that, if you take our U.S. men's national team example, do we have match winners? Like Pulisic, a match winner, right? He could take the ball, even though he's pretty right-footed, very right-footed. He could dribble by a guy and create something out of nothing, a little something out of nothing. Like you don't develop that by just, by not, you have to play a lot to develop that. You know what I mean?
I'll say competitiveness because it's game type situations.
Yeah. And we've talked about needing it to be like lower pressure. Like you don't want it to be super high stakes, but as you move up, as you get better, like the games will get more competitive.
Yeah. Like people will want to win.
Yeah. And you learn how to like kind of dig in and be a gamer a little bit too, as you get older.
And teamwork, playing with other players.
Like
kind of goes along with competitive and passion.
Passion for the crest.
Yeah, man.
For the crest. Yeah. I like the teamwork thing because one of the things people want to talk about, like, let's say passing, and they're like, I want my team to be a possession team. They need to pass. But like
the Dutch style,
do they need to learn the style, like the technique of passing, or do they need to know the decision-making, when to pass and when to dribble? Because it's not just passing that's going to make it work. It's effective passing that you need. And I'm not saying like there's nothing good about just rhythm of passing and keeping the ball moving. But when like these kids are little, like I feel like the teamwork in terms of working in pairs to beat a 2v1, or to work in a 2v1, work in a 3v2, a 2v2, a pass and move, maybe a pass and you drop off to give more depth. So you learn kind of like the depth, the width, when to like expand, when to get tighter again. And I think all of that stuff comes from more like informal, structured play rather than cues from a coach, especially rather than instructions from a coach, which bug me big time. Yeah, and then passion, like I feel like that's how you develop a love for the game. Like I didn't like truly love soccer till I was older and understood the pro game more and stuff like that. But now, like when kids go and they want to play soccer, they want to play the game, they want to play 3v3 or 7v7, they love the game. They don't love the isolated skill or the skills clinic you're putting on. I heard like I saw, we'll talk about it in a minute, but I saw like a tweet or something about, how many people would show up to a club if they had, Friday night pickup? Not enough. How many people would show up or pay money to go to a Friday night skills clinic? A lot. It's embarrassing that that's like a thing, right?
That's crazy.
And that kind of leads us to this next like subtopic. I wrote out 5 or 6 why there's a decline in free play. Now, I don't know how much free play there was in soccer, but if you go on YouTube and look up soccer, what's it called? Soccer Town USA.
Yeah.
It's about, who was it? Tony Meola, Tab Ramos.
Was Tony Meola the goalie?
Yeah, I think it was. And somebody else, but they all played for what's the town, bro? Kearney. They play for Kearney High School, and they all end up playing in the 1994 World Cup in the U.S. Right? 94. Yes, they play with our boy Alexi. But they all grew up in this town, Kearney. So they all played for Kearney High School. But it was the culture of everybody would go to this street, like this basketball court or whatever, and just play soccer like all day. They'd go after school. They would go after their high school games or, after, whatever. And they would just play all the time, and they all just got really good. So like Ashington, England, like we talked about before, there was these legends coming out of this street pickup game. Were they coming out of this skills clinic, camp, like elite super premier FC? Like, no, they were coming from because they were playing all of the time. they were just ballers.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that is super common or was ever super common, but I think we've seen a decline in some of these. So I kind of went through and I did some research on like just play in general for especially kids, and then soccer. The first one,
before we start, you think there is a decline?
There's definitely a decline. I don't think there's an increase.
Yeah, there's probably is a decline.
Now, if you took like, okay, listen to like dad talk about him playing like different sports with his boys, right? Like baseball, roller hockey, whatever. But if you took that and added the increase of like the love of soccer to that culture, we'd be a powerhouse, right? Because people would just be playing all the time with their friends. And then there'd be more pickup. But like, because soccer's now like the sport or one of these sports, not baseball, roller hockey, whatever they want to play. But there just isn't that culture of going to play anymore. So one of the things I put were suburban soccer culture versus cities. So like, think about a city. And Taylor Twellman has this company that tries to build these futsal courts on basketball courts in cities, which is a good idea. I don't know how effective it is and if they're targeting the right markets, but if we were able to really tap into the cities, we'd get a lot of unstructured play, right? A lot of pickup games and stuff. But look at the main soccer culture here. It's suburban. It's drive my kid to soccer practice, drive them home, go to a tournament, drive back, that kind of thing. So like, is there time or a need for pickup soccer in there from the parents' point of view? Not really.
Right.
I don't know. What do you think? Like I think if to join a youth soccer league in this country. So the teams I coach, they play in South Jersey Soccer League. And then there's EDP and there's a few higher levels. If to join any league, it was mandatory to host like one night a week, pick up soccer for free. And you had to build a walled in like 4v4 like court. Could be on the grass, could be on concrete, whatever. But the club had to build, walls around it or something and offer the equipment to play. Had to put it there. We'd be the best soccer country in the world. We would be up there with France and England, and we'd be just exporting just loads of players everywhere, creative players. Because there's plenty of players playing, they just don't play enough. What would that cost the club? $3,000, $4,000?
Yeah, it costs all these small clubs a lot of money, and I don't think I don't think the US would become a powerhouse.
Not
because
overnight.
Right. Because kids don't love the game as much.
Well, no, there are kids that love the game, and it's part of the culture. So you build these things, and you make it a part of the club culture, right? Talk about Friday night pickup sessions or Wednesday night pickup sessions or whatever.
Friday night pickup sessions are going to win us World Cup.
Yeah. It's not once a week, right? Because it's not enough. But getting people out is a good start.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Think we've come this far with our, not great model. Like, it's not perfect. It's not awful either, because there's still more players playing in decent level. But you build these things, and we're developing. If each club develops, all right, let's say this. Each youth local club, right? They each have a team of 15 players. If 3 players get a little bit more creative out of every one of those clubs, like, that's a compounding effect. Then when those players move on to maybe a bigger youth club, then they're all 15% more creative, 20% more creative. Then the best players are 50% more creative. And the best players also grow a little bit and become athletic beasts. And then eventually you just build the bigger pool of potentially creative players. Not every player is going to grow up to be Neymar, but every player could be a little bit more free flowing when they play. Mm-hmm. And it would create a more like tight knit community around the game. So that's
for kids who pay to play.
I mean, the township, I would hope that US Soccer or the township or the park or whatever, because wherever these youth clubs are based,
there's probably a lot of good kids in cities right now.
Yeah.
Who might not be on a club.
Yeah. So the instructor that I worked with for my D license course, my US Soccer coaching course, he coached at Manhattan Soccer Club, and they play on, I think, Randall's Island. He said at times there's 7 or 8 club teams on a turf field because it's so populated. So yeah, those players are all willing to come to practice in the city. They all live in the city. Now there's probably way more players that don't play club, but play street soccer. But if all of those players also played some street soccer or played some, pickup soccer at that field, then they all get a little bit more informal play than they would have otherwise. Right. So like the solution doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be a little bit better. And you're setting a foundation for more of this stuff. Another one I wrote down: decline in free play. Single parents or dual working parents more likely to tell the kids to stay home. Right. I'm just thinking of like, if you go way back in the day, theoretically, like a dad goes to work, a mom stays home or something. Right. Like, or, now there's like more single parents. I think this is an actual like statistic that's true.
Yeah.
They're less likely to let their kids go to their friend's house because they're going to say, all right, you got to stay home because I'm not home.
Yeah. I also think, depending where you grow up, mm-hmm. Some areas might be, there might be a lot of violence. Yeah. So like before, parents would be like, yeah, go ahead. And you just run out the door and start playing with your friends. Mm-hmm. Now, in the crazy world we live in, you like, I don't know if you can do that all the time.
Yeah. Which, like, it's unfortunate for the people that live in those areas, but like, I think soccer could be an escape or whatever, but it's also like, it might not work in an area like that. And we're strictly talking soccer, not like solving the world here. So, but the soccer would be better elsewhere. Like if you built those free play arenas or something.
Right.
Or just had more pickup. But like, yeah, there's a mom doesn't want her kids going out. So she can't, the kid at home can't go round up his friends and play in his backyard, 4v4 game. Or they're not allowed to go to soccer practice early to play or stay late because they have to go. This is another one. I don't know much about this, but I heard standardized testing and possibly cutting PE classes. I think it was more of the attitude toward standardized testing in sports and coaching. So like, I don't know much about this, but I guess like a lot of education systems now, like the public schools will like test off of certain material that needs to be taught. And if it's like a very cookie cutter thing, then like that stuff trickles down to a lot of coaches too. A lot of coaches are teachers. Trickles down to how a lot of coaches would think, how a lot of parents think, how a lot of kids end up thinking that you fill in this hole, you do this is how you learn. when really the game is so much more free flowing. You got to add like your own like spunk, your own like culture to it. So if we're like very cutthroat in how we do it, you're not going to get that creativity.
Interesting.
This is one of the biggest ones for me. Professionalism of youth soccer and youth soccer parenting. Like when I'm talking about, like, you got kids 12 years old that are in these mega super like youth clubs, right? Because they're good players. They don't know anything about it, but the parent is pushing them to play on this team. They might not even like playing, or they might have not played enough soccer to be good. But then this super team has the best 12-year-olds from the area. They have a coach who's getting paid a lot of money to coach that team, and he might need to get a lot of wins, or the parents are going to be upset, or he might need to structure these super, structured training sessions for the players, which puts a ceiling on it, right? Because it's kind of what we talked about. If the players are in this structure all the time, then it puts a ceiling on like their creativity. If Neymar played in, certain 11v11 system at 12, you think he'd be doing all his moves and his flair? No. Same with all of the most creative players. And if we just give these players a better chance to develop that creativity, then
the thing is, parents are the ones that think they know what's best for their kids and everything, when they should just give it to the coach. Let the coach handle it.
You should let the player play. If the player wants to, like, not saying let your kid do whatever you want, right? But if the kid wants to go play 5v5 soccer with their friends after school, you hope that they do that because that's fun. They find it fun. And then if you make the soccer training or the soccer coaching youth team about like play-centered creativity, free-flowing, rather than super structured like youth soccer like it is most of the time, then they'll have more fun in the free-flowing and they'll develop their creativity. But I think like and also the parenting too, some of it drives me nuts because I see a lot, like you'll find parents on, they might mean the best for their kid, but they post on Facebook that they won this tournament, or they want their kid to be better than this kid subconsciously at something else. They want them to be on the A team rather than the B team, or to make ODP region, or play Division 1 instead of Division 3, right? And that's another thing I put is like end goal of college recruitment instead of enjoyment and fun is like killing the decline of free play. Because if mom went to us and was like, I want you guys to have the most fun playing soccer, how much different would we feel about going to play with our friends rather than, I need you guys to get a Division 1 scholarship? And I'm not talking like someone trying to get out of a tough situation like you hear with these football stories, but the goal shouldn't be like you got to get recruited. Like it should be like you got to have fun, like play with, like that kind of thing.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think
I see that a lot.
that comes from the parents. And if like
Facebook.
Yeah. Oh, dude, all the time. And to me, I feel like it should come from US soccer, maybe to the leagues. I don't know who the middleman is, to the clubs. Every club is a member of US soccer, I assume, right? The clubs need to do a better job of educating parents, coaches, players, all that stuff about like, if you enjoy this more, if you encourage your kid to be more into the game and want to play with their friends more informally, unstructured, let them be creative, then
yeah, but then it's on the kid too.
Yeah.
If the drive it, or if the kid's not enjoying it, or he doesn't have the drive to do it, you can't force him to do it, because then he won't like it in the end. Then when he has the opportunity to get out and stop playing, he would.
Well, to be honest, like I don't think I was ever going to quit soccer when I was younger, but I definitely didn't enjoy it. And I wasn't like, hey, we got to get to soccer practice. Come on. But that was because we never played enough. I never enjoyed playing informally enough, or playing on my own. But like, and there's players that I coach now that weren't like that either. But I think now the players are like, when you play more, the players are excited to come and play and to try new things. And I always think, like, I found this one lady on social media, and she's like she calls herself an educator, right? I think she does like homeschooling or whatever, but basically she's like an outside of the box educator. And she related teaching to Legos. and how like back in the day when Legos first started, kids could design whatever they want. They'd make a rocket ship and turn that rocket ship into like Batman or something. I don't know. But now like you buy these Lego sets and it's just follow this instruction, put this here, put this there. And it's not designed for a kid to think creatively. And like, if we make soccer like that, what are we going to get? Unless you design absolute robots, like Bastian Schweinsteiger kind of robot, like who actually was an informal player. He's just like, you know what I mean? Like people always thought about like the German machine or what's his name? Michael Ballack, right? Unless you design the perfect robot, then the robots aren't going to be any good. You got to be able to think for yourself and make decisions.
I also think another one is electronics, video games,
Yeah,
stuff like that.
Yeah, that's going to happen. And I think
TikTok.
I think when like kids with Fortnite, right? Because they're good at Fortnite, they play all the time, and it's a social thing. If we get like reverse engineer that and make informal soccer a social thing that they can improve at and get better at and enjoy and be good at, then you kind of
which was a thing for kids.
It was a thing, and it's definitely not just the fact that like everyone has like an Xbox and an iPhone now. It's way more than that. I think if people enjoy it, then they'll find a way to do it, and the parents will find a way to put their kid in that situation. Because, like we said, like parents will pay $100 for a Friday night skills clinic, but they won't even think twice about they won't even think about putting their kid in a free like pickup session every Friday night or driving them there. So that's kind of my.
I feel like parents need to take like a U.S. soccer course before becoming a soccer parent.
Well, you'd be surprised because there's a lot of coaches that take these U.S. soccer courses that still don't know what the heck they're doing. And like, I'm not like trying to bash on you. I'm not trying to bash on anybody, but like, this is how like if U.S. soccer or some governing body, like we talked about Das Reboot, Germany, they came down and they said, this is how we're going to do it. We're building all these soccer courts, informal play, then we'll get them in these academies. Here's our system. U.S. soccer doesn't have a system of play. Now, I do think the practice structure is pretty good. Like, it's a good start because at least they're getting 20 to 30 minutes of hopefully unstructured play, which might be the most they get all week. So you got to take advantage of it and let them do their thing without stepping in to try and coach them a whole lot. So, gotcha. Yeah. So, anything else? Like,
I'm pretty sure we stuck with the definition of free play. I mean, stuck with the term free play the whole time.
Free play, informal play.
Yeah, I like informal.
Informal?
Yeah.
Wow.
Unstructured. Trying
to think, like, even as an older player, do you think you could benefit more from it?
I don't know how much more developing like, you know what I mean? Like when you get older, you can't like develop at the rate you do like when you're young.
Well, that's what we say. Like this, like you could put a ceiling on a kid's ability by not getting them in this informal play environment sooner. But I still think even as older players, like we could improve more by playing more. Like when I'm playing more, like let's say when, if I hop in and play like a men's league for like 4 straight weeks, I'm going to be better after those 4 straight weeks than I will if I just trained on my own and worked on isolated skills. Yeah.
Which in let's say like the past 5 years of me taking soccer really serious, I think I benefit the most of just finding tons of different places to play.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the fact that
I never turned down an opportunity to play, whether it was for a team that was the summer team or an indoor team.
Yeah. And it's, like we said, we're talking about free play, but there's levels to it, right? There's not playing, then there's might be like some training, and then there's like structured play, and then there's informal play, which I think is like the top of the top, like best way to improve. And like, to be honest, I never really understood it. And now that like I'm kind of done playing, like I understand it more. Pros are always going to pickup games, right? I just saw a picture today, like Chris Richards and like Ricardo Pepi. We're at some pickup game in Dallas.
Yeah.
I remember a bunch of the Union players used to go to this one place in Philly to play pickup, like at night, like in the city, just because like they're just looking to like, and then you're able to stay fit and try new things, get a lot of touches on the ball. And yeah, but the biggest impact it'll make is at the youth level with more kids like becoming creative players.
Yeah. What age you think it starts?
Should start.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's like the fact that soccer culture mainly starts at home, right? If you're kicking the ball around with a family member, but like if you're 4 and 5 years old, like you could be playing against like a sibling. If you're 7, 8 years old, hopefully you're playing with your friends at recess or something. Like it would just be cooler if there goes our light. It would just be cooler if there was more places to play with larger groups of people. No, the smaller the game, the better, right? 2v2 and 3v3, you get more touches. But like if you have a culture and a community around it, I think that'd be awesome.
Yep.
All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Or you want to add to this?
I did at one point in the middle of this whole thing. I had a really good point, but I forgot it.
Dude.
So I'm gonna have to tell you off air.
All right, maybe we'll.
And if it's that important, we'll tweet it out.
All right, we got to get back on the Twitter. We got to read. We don't tweet a whole lot, so.
All right.
I'm
not on Twitter personally myself that much anymore, but
all right, I like Twitter. So talked a lot about free play, informal play, and we're not just out here talking about the problem, right? Like we gave some solutions, some thoughts, and it's not on. On the half turn isn't out there to save the whole soccer world. It's not for us. All right. So that's episode 31. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right, cool. So if you're seeing this in your feed, please, leave a rating review. Let us know like if you like this type of episode or would rather just hear like our hot takes about like professional soccer too.
Or both.
Yeah, both. All right. That's it. Anything?
Nope.
All right.
All right. Peace.
Peace.